Hi, my name is Sampath, and as we're all self-quarantining today and for the last few weeks and into the indefinite future, a lot of us are wondering how we could be of service to different communities where we feel we might be able to make a contribution. So I thought to myself as the weeks are passing that I would attempt to begin a commentary of being in time, something I've thought about doing orally. I've written on the text, and I've given lectures at conferences and presentations and certain classes, but for the most part, attempting a virtual running commentary of such a daunting work is something that's been weighing on me. And I thought, okay, maybe I can take maybe an hour a day or hour every few days to slowly work through the text, something I've been grappling with for many years, as has many others. Being in Time, written by Martin Heidegger and published in 1927, originally in German, one can argue stands as the most influential philosophical work in the continental European philosophical scene. Now, others in other traditions, let's say the Anglo-American analytic tradition, may dispute that claim. Or, on the other hand, within that tradition, there have been many great commentators in the 20th century that have attempted a dialogue, a very serious dialogue with the text, to try and take seriously some of its claims to originality and achievement within the Western philosophical tradition. Certainly, since coming up almost 100 years since the publication, many would argue that there is a great global reception of the work, as it's been translated virtually in almost every language. And according to some calculations, Heidegger could be the most referenced Western philosopher since Aristotle, and maybe more. So it's well worth our time, I think, to spend a few minutes, however much time people might want to spend going through the commentary, trying to work through a very significant piece of our tradition in the Western context. It's almost hard to believe that one can study physics in the 20th century and ignore something like the birth of relativity with Einstein or the birth of quantum mechanics through Heisenberg. So my analogy is that in at least the continental European philosophical scene, Heidegger has that much impact within his own realm. So we will begin with a look at the actual work. I'm going off the Robinson and Macquarie translation of 1962 and republication through Harper and Row. There's also a version of this online for free in a PDF, the exact copy that people can bring up and they can look at that on their screen. So if one does a quick canvassing of the table of contents, one can see from the very outset that Heidegger is attempting to take on the biggest question in Western philosophy and pose the question in the most grandiose way. Because he's not just going to pose the question of ontology, as most people might be quick to think that he's doing, but he's asking about the meaning of being, not just the question of being, what is being. He wants to know about the meaning of it, and we're going to get into some of those distinctions. But from the very outset, he's also asking about the meaning of the question. Well, as soon as he says something, what is the question of the meaning of being? You can turn that around and ask, well, what about the meaning of the question? Therefore, we have to ask, who's asking this question? Why is it important? Is this glass of water asking that question? Is God above, if such an entity exists, asking that question? Is the tree outside doing that? No, who's asking this question? So as you move through the table of contents, before we begin the actual reading of the text, you can see that he has to spend a lot of time trying to justify what he's up to. What does this all mean? What is actually going on? What's the event of this work? How's it revealing itself? How's it unfolding? The work is divided into two divisions of part one. There is no part two in this work, and there are only two divisions. We're going to get into that in a second. But part one is titled The Interpretation of Dasein in Terms of Temporality and the Explication of Time as a Transcendental Horizon for the Question of Being. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of terms, a lot of words. It seems like a lot of repetition. Until you clearly, analytically dissect every single term in here, one can jump to the conclusion like, okay, well, this is like a lot of mumbo jumbo. He's throwing a lot out there. What is he talking about? What's the difference between temporality and time? What about interpretation versus explication? why does he say interpretation of this thing called Dasein in terms of temporality, but then just the explication of time after that, and the explication of time. Transcendental horizon. Back to that question of being, as in the question of the meaning of being, not the question of being. So no one is in this business of Heidegger to say being is this or that, being is this cup, being is my friend, being is God, being is whatever. It's what is the question of the meaning of being? What's the meaning of that question? It's not circular either. I'm not talking about a subject-predicate relationship here between the poser of the question and what we expect as an answer. I have to talk about a certain relation here, a very complex one built even into this structure. And as you see, as he moves through division 1 of this part 1, he's going to talk about being in the world. He's going to talk about space and environment and how we comport ourselves within the world. He's going to move through something called care, Zorge, concern, anxiety, dread, as homonyms are going to move within this Zorge. I don't want to translate it. Angst as an anxiety. I don't want to move in that direction either, but just care is how they put it in English. And we'll work with that. And that's where this division 1 of part 1 ends. Me personally, I don't spend as much time in division 1. I think there's decades of interpretation. What Dreyfus is concerned, one of the canonical figures, and spent his whole life trying to unpack division 1. To be honest, since my doctoral days as a young person, I quickly gravitated to division 2. Obsessed with this question of time and death and the way Heidegger's trying to treat that. Vis-a-vis the history of philosophy, how other philosophers try to take on maybe 2 of the most mysterious or complicated questions in all of philosophy. You can talk about all kinds of stuff in philosophy, but ask someone to talk about time and death, those are pretty hard things. They're pretty scary things. Regardless of what stage of life you're in or what time period you're living in, or whether you're living through a crisis like we are now. And one has to think about the epiphenomenality and the everydayness of the recurrence of this tragedy. People are dying, and every life is so infinitely invaluable and precious. And yet we're statistically accumulating the number of deaths per day due to this crisis. So one, in other words, doesn't have to wait for a crisis to understand the magnitude of how serious these questions are when it comes to our mortality, our finitude, the fact that there is something called death, and what is that? What is that event? And then, as many commentators noted, if you look at the end of the introduction, he kind of announces a third division that we don't see in the published work. A third division that was supposed to take on time and being. So the book title is Being and Time. Division 1 is about this preparatory analysis, explicating temporality in terms of this thing called Dasein. I'm not going to get into Dasein just yet, because we'll spend this first session talking about that. And then being in the world, that's division 1. Division 2, time and death. This division 3, which never emerged, at least in the publication. We'll get into what happens right after the publication with regard to his lectures that were published. But if we just stick with this division 2, which is all we get, he ends with this confrontation with Hegel. There's a picture of Heidegger behind me. We go this way. There's Hegel. Not to fetishize or celebrate these 2 great white men who are dead and long dead. One extremely problematic given the legacy of his historical context and his Nazism, which I don't want to dismiss or separate the man and the life from the actual work and the achievement. So we will spend some time with how problematic Heidegger is in general, and this debate about whether the whole thing needs to be dismissed for that one very simple reason: his decisions in his historical context and the legacy of that. Putting that aside, I'm not dealing with that question right now. I'm just sticking to this text of 1927. So division 2 ends with this confrontation of Hegel. That's why he's going to be in the background as well. We're not going to get to his text per se in this session. But instead of beginning chronologically or linearly with regard to our commentary, one would think, okay, let's open up the book and start reading the first sentence and the first paragraph in the introduction. I want to draw your attention to chapter 4. And I'll explain myself. Why am I jumping all the way to chapter 4 in division 1? Title that chapter, Being in the World as Being With and Being Oneself, the They. If you turn to page 149, you'll see that's the chapter title. And I'm going to move to the screen behind me. I have my laptop that I'm speaking to through Zoom to record this, but if you see me go above my camera, it's because I'm looking at my big screen PC that has the work up there so I can read the text, come back and look into the camera, and when I'm talking, that's when I'm not reading off of some lecture. I'm just going to comment and think and try to explicate. But when I look up and you see me doing something, it's because I'm reading the actual text of Heidegger. So why did I choose this chapter 4? Being in the world is being with and being oneself, the they, in double quotes, in virtually every page of the McQuarrie Robertson translation. The translators, attempt to explicate their translational choices, like what were they doing with the German. And to read Heidegger, quite frankly, one may have to reckon Latin, Greek. I wish biblical Hebrew, and I want to talk about that as well. What's being included here? Why is this? Heidegger himself did not reckon this, at least explicitly. Who knows what he did in his early training? But those of us that have a profound passion, love, concern for the Judaic tradition and what contribution that could be made to the shaping of this entire enterprise by Heidegger, whether he wants to recognize it or not, we're going to bracket that question, but meaning Hebrew. But certainly what's seen in the text is a confrontation with Greek, Latin, and of course he's writing in his original German. So we're going to look at those translational choices in the German when we get to these English phraseology. So, why again are we starting with this chapter 4? Being in the world, being with, being oneself, the they. And the translations are at the bottom in the footnotes. In many respects, when you try to open up being time for the first time, and you think about yourself, you're like, okay, it's me, I'm a person. There's supposed to be a unified self or an I inside me. I was born, I have a birth certificate, I got parents. Thankfully, I'm still here. In the future, until there is a permanent delay of death, or the ubiquity of cryogenic freezing, or the multiplication of cells so we can live forever. The ubiquitous fact of life is death. It's a movie that doesn't go on forever. And other people can watch the movie after you die, but you can't keep pausing the movie to stave off the end, or keep turning it and replaying the movie back and forth. You're going through it once. You can remember things and you can anticipate things, but for the most part, if you're a living human being, you're not in a movie that can be replayed by yourself. And if you're dead, you're not going to be part of the audience that can replay the movie a billion times, because you're not the one there with them watching it about your own past. But that's a human being. That's me and you. That's every living thing. What if we put out the proposition that Heidegger is not talking about a human being? And you're going to say, well, why would I want to waste my time? I care about human beings. I care about what I need to learn something. Why do I exist? What do I mean? How do I explain my anxiety? How come I feel unfulfilled? What's this sense of urgency about doing something in the future? I'm living through these stages of life. I'm a teenager. I'm going through this. I'm in my early 20s. I'm doing that. Here are my societal kind of expectations. I'm supposed to do this and that. When I'm 18, I can vote. When I'm 21, I can drink, get ID, and go to a bar. 16, I can drive. So there's this signpost of what we're supposed to be doing at every moment. So why would a human being be concerned about an entity that is not a human being or any living thing? Early in the introduction, he's going to go through some pains to say, look, sorry, folks, I'm not talking about the existentialism of human angst and nausea living in the modern period. Those of us that maybe grew up with religion and left it, now we're sort of living in a void. There's a spiritual, all the angst about being a human being when you don't have answers, and how people fall tragedies. Like, why do certain people experience tragedies? Others seem to just kind of sail along. Why do bad things happen to good people? Those are the human questions about the human condition. But he's not going to talk about that. He's not a social scientist. So, as much as I love and respect, especially my colleagues in the fields of anthropology and sociology and psychology, he's not talking about actual living human subjects that you can derive certain, processes or assumptions that transfer over from the natural sciences to empirically explain what you observe and see in terms of patterns and relationships, causal schemes between what human beings are and do and what the outcomes are with regard to society. or the structures of different cultures in the past, and what are the laws and the mechanisms inside these very complex systems of organizing human culture. We have this miraculous diversity from way back when to now. It's one of the greatest mysteries of the planet. Why this remarkable diversity in diet, cuisine, constructions of gender, belief systems, rites and rituals and symbols. Why this symbol for this religion? Why this for that? Like, I'm an outsider in another culture. I go to a country and I say, wow, was that miraculous polytheism? And when I go to India and I see all these colorful gods. So he's not going to talk about any of that. He's not talking about anthropology, sociology, psychology. He's not a natural scientist. You know what they do? They use math and the experimental method to try to describe nature and discover its deepest secrets and produce those laws. The laws discovered by Einstein, the highest levels, the laws of Newton. Great, I love that too. But we're not doing that. Lastly, we're not going to be talking about theology. And as Paul Tillich said, there are many, many, many different ways to think about a definition of theology, not just the logos of the theos, the study of word, reason, ratio of this entity called God and the being of God. And what are the tools within human experience and reason and intuition and sensibility and feeling to try to describe that, not only what that entity is, but what our relationship is, and the moral, ethical foundations of that relationship. So many branches of theology, but we're not talking about even a science, as Tillich would say, an experience of faith. A lot of us have faiths. We have different types of modalities of faith. And it's not just some simple notion like, okay, I'm sitting here and I believe in some kind of pictorial conception of a God as a symbol that I pray to. It's a deep commitment, an existential thrownness about the things that we're most concerned about, as Tillich would say. But Heidegger says we're not doing that either. We're not going to be talking about this entity, although what's supposed to be ontological and transcendental and beyond any human conception or perception. No one says, I am God. One religion, Christianity, claims an incarnation of that in a human historical person who lived and died 2,000 years ago. But the big claim for that religion is that without anyone seeing that person dying, they're sealed in a tomb. They saw them die, but when they're put in the tomb as a dead body, no other witness was inside that sealed tomb. And miraculously, Anastasia, he rose up, he was resurrected from the dead, then came out and appeared. So other than that religion, no other religion makes a claim that you can point to one single human being as God, conquering death and reappearing and is ascended and is waiting there outside this sacred time as we live this historical earthly time to come back for this total redemption. It's part of a very specific narrative and religious text. So we can't turn to these great mysteries in religion and try to explain the complexity of this entity beyond all beings, which would be something like God, whatever that means to different people in various religious systems. Because for Heidegger, that's sort of like, in a way, taking a conception that should be beyond the human and still, as he uses the word ontic, making it in some kind of, at least an object of our intuition or sensibility or feeling as a human subject. We have a relationship to it. For me, I don't think my iPhone is this object of divine devotion. I know we use it all the time, but it's different from someone who's religious and may have an object of their devotion. So you can't turn this transcendental being into some kind of object of devotion, which risks it becoming something immanent, maybe even material, and not just the materiality of a symbol, but just that the symbol contains an ontological status as an entity that is ethereal and has this mystical presence beyond even the physical structure, material nature of the symbol. So, wow, okay, wait a minute, we're not dealing with any humanism, normal ways to do existential analyses of why human beings are suffering. It's not a theodicy, how do we justify why bad things happen in some kind of providential plan. We're not doing theology, not doing the social sciences. What are we talking about here? What's going on here? Why? Well, this is so bizarre. I thought philosophy is at least supposed to help human beings. And maybe as we discover the realm of animal cognition and intelligence and a whole other realm, as Derrida would say, that the animal is there. And the encounter with the animal is not simply objectification of it within the natural sciences, but is, the condition of possibility of even us thinking in terms of our own otherness as animal, distinct from animal, animal below the law, above the law. Animal is the horizon for everything that's possible. to shatter every kind of distinction we might have between the human and the animal, especially in the sciences. So, we can think about all these different ways to understand the questioner of this being and try to move in all these different realms, but that's precisely what's being suspended. We cannot talk about the human being as a starting point. So now one has to ask, okay, well, why are we doing this? What's important? Well, the fact of the matter is that, and using that word fact, as in the facticity, the undeniable, the irrepressible, the unsubstitutable sense of just being there, and I don't mean being in this home office of mine, even with these two guys in the background, and it being April, I should know the day, days are blending into each other as we self-isolate and home quarantine. April 16th, I think. Let me see here. Yeah, April 17th, Friday, April 17th, 12:48 p.m. Being as a point in space and time, chronologized in this Newtonian classical structure of 3 dimensions, width, height, length. That's what most human beings observe on Earth. And then time chronologically measured in the clock. Okay, it's this time, it's this day, minutes, hours, days, months, years. We're not going to use that framework. So being in that kind of space, measuring time attached to that, and say, okay, this is where I'm at. Being there is going to involve a type of clearing and exposure and nakedness, not as in like, that's a metaphor, not like the dreams we have when we're like giving a speech somewhere or outside in the city and suddenly we're naked. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Why did that happen? Or, don't have any shoes. Or, you're trying to. It's not psychoanalytic. It's not psychological. It's not spatial or metaphorical like that in any way. Again, that brings it back to the human. So we're going to have to get into this alterity of the exposure of being, there's this kind of expulsion that's taking place. There is a movement event involved in all this, and it's a very scary one. In a sense, it's uncanny because, again, it's not a geometrical thing that you're going to be able to spatialize. And the scariest of all is that you can't start with this present. As I mentioned, right now, whatever time it is, seconds are flowing. You can see this recording. You're going to see in the future when it gets played back. So let's just bracket all that, being there, and let's try to work through the terminology. So I'm going to bring up the chapter 4. Obviously, the foundational structure for this entity Dasein being there, being in the world. So somehow we're being in the world, and therefore there is a world. But he's going to add the being with, being -ones -self, the, they, in double quotes. So suddenly, what you might think is an isolated entity called Dasein you got all these other things. Pause on the history of philosophy. You may love to go back and read all these other great giants, Plato, Aristotle, all the way up to Hegel, on what the ultimate questions are. In Plato, the one and the many. When you think of this term, the they, it's a term that signifies a one, but is it a grouping? And dialectically, what happens when the one merges into the many? 5 fingers in one hand. Are they all there at the same time? Are they unified in one image? Is it neither nor? We're not going to get into dialectical issues about how do you have a unity inside some kind of plurality like the they. Let's just stick with this language here, his text. Let's work with it. And after I read for about a paragraph, I'll come back and look in the camera and then work through what I think is my explication. So chapter 4, page 149, Macquarie Robinson, 1962 translation. Being in the world as being with and being oneself, the they. Our analysis of the worldhood of the world has constantly been bringing the whole phenomenon of being in the world into view. Although its constitutive items have not all stood out with the same phenomenal distinctness as the phenomenon of the world itself, it's going to have to think about the world. We've interpreted the world ontologically by going through what is ready to hand within the world, and this interpretation has been put first because Dasein in its everydayness with regard to which Dasein remains a constant theme for study, not only is in a world, but comports itself towards that world with one predominant kind of being. Approximately for the most part, Dasein is fascinated with its world. Dasein is thus absorbed in the world, the kind of being which it thus possesses, and in general, the being in which underlies it, are essential in determining the character of a phenomenon which we are now about to study. We shall approach this phenomenon by asking who, italicized who, it is that Dasein is in its everydayness. All the structures of being which belong to Dasein, together with the phenomenon which provides the answer to this question of the who, are ways of its being. To characterize these ontologically is to do so existentially. We must therefore pose the question correctly and outline the procedure for bringing into view a broader phenomenal domain of Dasein's everydayness. By directing our researches, not service people, but researches, towards the phenomenon which is to provide us with an answer to the question of the who, we shall be led to certain structures of the Dasein which are equiprimordial with being in the world. Being with, Dasein with, the Germans are Mitsein and Mitdasein. In this kind of being is grounded the mode of everyday being oneself, Selbstsein. So you got being in the world, being with, Dasein with, Mitsein, Mitdasein is the translations, being the German original translations, and then being oneself, Selbstsein. The explication of this mode will enable us to see what we may call the subject of everydayness. Subject, single quotes, of everydayness, which he says is the they. Our chapter on the who of the average Dasein will thus be divided up as follows. An approach to the existential question of the who of Dasein, the Dasein with of others, everyday being with, everyday being oneself, and the they. So I'm going to stop there. That's where section 24, before we get to section 25. He's giving us his outline, Dasein, the who, Dasein with of others, everyday being with, being oneself, and the they. Just count that up. I see who of Dasein, I see Dasein with of others, I see everyday being with, I see everyday being oneself, and the they. Five things at least in the way he's introducing the structure. Okay, so I read that. It's a lot. What is that? It doesn't make any sense to me. There's a lot of redundancy and replication, Elijah going on between different terms. But, let's try to take this seriously. Let's think about this. What I want to say is, let's not think about being in the world right now. Don't think about, wow, I wish I wasn't around. I wish I lived in a different time period. Or I wish I lived in the future. We had better technology. We can solve cancer. We can do all kinds of things. Oh, I work too much. I need to go to the office. It's like dreary. I want to be on vacation. I want to be on the beach. I'm alone. I want to be with somebody. I want to meet somebody. I'm waiting to, share my life with someone, have a companion. So we have all these different circumstances of different possibilities of being in the world, constantly anticipating, projecting out there. Maybe we're weighed down by the past. We feel really, really unfulfilled or regretful, guilty. We promised to do something, we didn't do it, or, the weight of the present is too much. There's so much going on in my life right now. I have so much anxiety. I can't manage all the tasks I have ahead. I don't know what way forward. It's like, wow. So I'm drowning in the present. Got this huge tidal wave of the future coming at me because there's so much I'm pulling myself into, but all at the same time, I feel like it's crashing down because time's passing, and yet, all these possibilities are about to descend on me, and I gotta make choices. God, that past is like this big, huge, thing attached to me, dragging me. This chain attached to this big block of cement. Just trying to, God, can I just get rid of that? And I want to just, embrace the present for what it is without all that baggage. Let's leave aside all that, because that's all spatialized time. That's all what a lot of people might think is the case here, of why being in the world is so difficult, so challenging. When he says, most of the time that's what people are doing. They're going through the world. Everything is sort of ready to hand. I feel a little thirsty right now, so I'm going to have a glass of water. It's there. I have a sense of what I'm comporting myself towards. I know what it does. I know what kind of satisfaction I've done it a million times. So, so when there's stuff out there, whether they can be appropriated, they're within my reach, That has been the analysis, and that's how most people would analyze things. How do we think about being in the world? So in our comportment with everything we got to do, those choices we got to make, and objects we find useful, not because they're utilitarian and they fulfill a function and a mental desire. I'm hungry, I got to eat. But there's a relationship underneath all that that discloses as to why I exist in the world in the way I do. I don't want to get into all that. There's billions of commentaries. We can talk about that all day long. That's not what the everyday is going to be. Let's just focus this who. Why is he asking about the who? And then he's got to bring in all these other structures to unpack the who-ness. He's not just saying, you can ask me, who are you? Somebody comes to me, who are you? I'll say, oh, I'm Raj Sampath. Nice to meet you. What's your name? Oh, I'm John Smith. So not that who. It's not my function in society. I happen to be a professor. I'm married, so I'm a husband to my partner, my wife. I'm a son to parents. So you can fill in the who as a functional identity of the living human being and tick off a bunch of boxes as to what you are. My U.S. Census assigns me a race. I happen to disagree with that, the U.S. Census system, but brown American, Asian American categories, my category. There's African Americans, there's Latinx, there's non-Latinx white people, multiracial people, there's Native American, American Indian. So there's so many ways to assign categories, whether it's through society or through self-appropriation, to say what you are. So the who, we're not going to have to empty out that aspect of who. But being with, mit sein, with the sein being hyphen with, mit Dasein, Dasein. I thought we're talking about Dasein being in the world. So what's this Dasein with? Are you with who or what is with Dasein? What's Dasein with? What's this being with? And then you think, okay, being oneself. Oh yeah, I've been talking all day long and I've talked to 1,000 people today. I finally get to go home and be by myself and, just listen to some music or, think or, enjoy something I really like to do, like to watch a movie or, maybe I'm artistic. I want to attempt to write something that's kind of artistic, but then I'm alone. No one's around. The door's closed and I can do whatever I want. So you think, okay, that's being oneself. And then this very, very elusive they. So being in the world has now become this question of the who. The who's got this splintering and all these other, he calls them, let me get the text right, structures that are primordial with the being in the world. Dasein being in the world. Who is that? It's not me, the person with this identity or name, but I got this being with, Dasein with, being itself. The they. Footnote 1, bottom of page 149. I'll just read that because that's going to help us unpack some of this. The German for the they is das Mann. The single quotes. In German, one may write man glaubt, one believes. It's going to be a little translation in German, but you'll see what he does with that. Or in French, one would write en quoi. Or in English, they believe, one believes, it is believed. But the German man and the French en are specialized for such constructions in a way in which the pronouns they, one, and it are not. So you can't really translate this stuff. The translators are talking about the German das Mann and then the en quoi for the French. So when you put it in English, they believe, one believe. You might think the they is like general society, or you can say anonymously instead of saying I believe or you believe, but you can say one believes that every 4 years we have a presidential election in the United States. So one can believe that. It's just because it encompasses everybody. How can you deny it's a fact? For now, we'll see what happens. It is believed. It's an assumption that everybody has within the society, even though we have to particularize that as an individual view. It's generally considered, it's believed that this happens at this time. The Super Bowl usually is in February. So, but he's not. We can't go with any of those constructions. The they, one, it are not subjects. There's accordingly no single idiomatic translation for the German Mann, which will not sometimes lend itself to ambiguity, and in general, we have chosen whatever construction seems the most appropriate in its context. But when Heidegger introduces this word with a definite article and writes das Mann, as he does very often in this chapter, we, the translators, shall translate this expression as the they, trusting that the reader will not take this too literally. Because in English, we can't go around saying the they. What does that mean? Vis-a-vis the crowd? Me, the Indian American, facing racism, let's say, in a predominantly white space, during Charlottesville, was there during those marches with the white supremacists. Is that the day? God forbid. Don't want to be with that. What is the they? How about just saying they, not the they? So why are you adding that article? So that's why therein lies the confusion, as translators say. So we're going to have to go into this who. We're going to have to think about the mit sign and the mit Dasein. We're going to think about the self sign being oneself, and we're going to have to think about this they. But you got to empty out all those ordinary signifiers. With being, oh wow, I'm with the world as a whole ontological possibility, set of possibilities and meaning. And then the forest that discloses like the meaning and the true revelation of what that authentic kind of communion with nature can be. An animal that I normally don't see in the city, just suddenly there next to me, and it would be wonderful. That's something's being revealed. Being with, as in, or in a religious setting, when I go to mass, I'm with God through the communion, the full presence. Dasein with, well, that's being in the world, and I can't be the only person in the world because, in principle, everybody is this Dasein because they're in the world too, as long as you're in the world. Get into, we'll get to that later, but, no longer being in the world. Well, that's going to be death, but not death as something you witness, someone dying, or something coming to an end and literally stopping, but as a possibility. It's a possibility of impossibility, no longer being Dasein. As long as Dasein is, it's incomplete. But as it is, it's not just present like this object, or me, the human being, talking right now. I'm contemporaneous. I can hear my voice. It's being recorded. Here's the time. I'm self-present. So we're not talking about that. And you're going to say, well, what's this Dasein? Well, that's the whole point. That's why we have to break out this, for him, an ontological analysis of these structures. What's this primordiality, equiprimordiality, all these other entities? Being with, okay, so you're not in the forest. Being yourself, mit Dasein, it's being in the world, but there are other Daseins. That doesn't just mean me and my relations with other people, my wife or students and faculty and colleagues, so it's not that. Oneself, remember, it's not like right now I'm by myself, I'm recording this, and so you say, okay, I'm with myself right now. Can't use that. And the they again is not individual partition, one in the many, or being one within the many, or one as the many. I'm a member of a species, a human species, a member of a race, as the census classifies me. So it's not that kind of oneself vis-a-vis any kind of relationality of categories. And then lastly, this they, we said, is not, just the amorphous, bringing back to what I just said about the one and the many, the individual versus some larger group or whole. Okay, so the existential analysis, which is what being in time is, because ultimately one could argue he doesn't end up answering his question, and he knows it too. What is the meaning of being? Well, it's going to be this. So now the text kind of keeps on moving along, and it gets to division 2, it doesn't get to its division 3. There's this heinous encounter with Hegel. It gets very confusing there. We're going to get to that eventually. So you're going to say, well, he doesn't answer his question. And it's interesting because in the introduction, he actually, I wouldn't say a cop-out, but there's a very, we call it sarcastic, but what's the word? Ironic? Maybe not so, but kind of effusive, maybe a sort of sleight of hand that he didn't intend, but there's something going on where he says, well, you know what? Those ancient Greeks, well, those were big people. They posed it, what is being, and something about their language, the ancient Greek language, that when you compose it, the most difficult texts in the Western tradition, Plato's Parmenides, the Nicomachean Ethics and Aristotle, and Book 10 of Metaphysics. So it's hard stuff. I hate to say it, folks, those are very hard things. It's not like reading, TV Guide or Newsweek or comic book. Maybe those are hard things for other people, or can be made to be hard for a lot of reasons. But this is some hard stuff. Like, I can't do the dense equations of general relativity and quantum mechanics. You need a PhD, you need decades of training just to do anything in that world. I haven't studied Chinese. I've studied German and French and Latin, Hebrew and Greek, but I haven't, literally, I wouldn't know how to read the script, and I wouldn't know what to do. Can't speak it, can't read it, nothing. So these are very, very difficult texts. He says, well, but even despite the difficulty, wow, you can get an historian like Thucydides to comment on his wars and give us like what's going on. And the same language can also generate this deep metaphysics. Because my problem is like, well, maybe for those guys, the question appeared, in a certain way, and they attempted to answer it. Because for me, I don't have that kind of flexibility, either in the conceptual powers to pose the question, or my language. I'm constrained because I got to make up some terms, and there's some things I got to do, given the complexity of German, how much resource it has anyway to do all kinds of stuff. He's saying there, like, look, cop out could be like, well, he's already telling us an answer. You may not be able to answer this. So that's how the whole work begins, even though why would he undertake 450, 65, 500 pages of text to pose this question if you're not going to try to figure it out? So here we are. At least we're at this point with the who and the being, with the Dasein, with the being oneself and the they. You can map the individual self, if you're going to go with that as one possibility that's going to emerge for Dasein, is to maybe take that one notion of the self, by your identity, your name, when you were born, etc. What are you doing right now? What phase in life are you in? But that's one of many possibilities that this Dasein can choose from. And you're going to say, well, is Dasein kind of crazy or multiple personality? Suffering from kind of multiple personality disorder? No, it's not that kind of fragmentation. There's something very, very fundamental about Dasein. Again, from the introduction, it has a relation not only to being, but the question. It's one of that entities that is by nature going to pose this question. This question is of the utmost concern to it. The question, the understanding, the potentiality for that to even engage and inhabit the question is built into it. So you can say, wow, it's pretty unique, kind of superhero type entity. You take on the question of the meaning of being. It's a universal necessary question. And then it cares about it and it's going to figure it out. Well, so Dasein, and although you think being in the world just means being a human in the world, and according to all these predicates, you got to do things, you got to make use of things, and you got projects, and you got to build a table, and you got to this and that. Nope. The who-ness is a mystery. This relationship of being that Dasein has. Time is a transcendental horizon to understand being. The understanding is built into Dasein. It turns out Dasein itself is going to be rooted. Its being is going to be this care, which will emerge later, and all that's going to be grounded in this very weird thing called ecstatic temporality, coming towards this having been making present. The ecstasy is something in and for itself and something outside of itself, as this unified, primordial, finite temporalizing of time as a disclosure. That's not your linear time that's flowing. This is something more primordial. All that linear stuff that you think of time as, past back there, future is ahead of me, right now, all that stuff is derived from something deeper, but we're racing ahead. But Dasein is rooted in its being. It has this primordial rootedness of this problem of not only temporality, but what's called the temporalizing of time. But we don't want to go there. We want to go to Dasein and care and then temporality and death and then division two. We're going to stay right here. So the who-ness of Dasein, if you have being with this transcendence, being with some kind of sense of transcendence going outside of itself, being with Dasein is not just being with yourself, being alone. Being with Dasein when you're with others, co-present with others at a party. You're not with Dasein sometimes when you're alone. Well, I'm not with Dasein right now, I'm by myself. Technically, virtually, I'm with you, but this is a recording, so no one's seeing it right now, so there's no one else there. Someone else will play it in the future, maybe not. I think it's an entirely useless endeavor. But so the Dasein with is not Dasein with Dasein as externalized. And the transcendence is also not, if it's you're thrown in the world, something that you're reaching out ahead, projecting yourself outward, you're thrown into something, you're just constantly projecting. You might think, okay, well, there's a lot of anxiety in terms of, I know there's like something ticking in me. I wasn't born to live forever. I'm not some Greek god. The many myths are reincarnation, so you're not just going to go through a cycle of lives, the soul going from one body to another. Just assume that, you live once, YOLO, you only live once. Here you are, this is your body. You're not, I'm not that squirrel out there on the tree. This is me. So, being with that entity of being thrown into possibilities where time is going to exude out of yourself. Because remember those tidal waves, all that passes. So you're already there. You already did it, present is not just being present as in the time and space trans 1:12. This is my room. And future isn't tomorrow, Saturday. I got to go do X, Y, Z. Well, actually, I don't because we're all self-isolated. But typically on Saturday, I might go for that run, or we go, go to the gym, whatever. So there's outstanding things, stuff that you're bringing along, you're coming back to because you've already started it. And it's not just like starting a project that you need to finish. I started working on this yesterday, I got to continue. It's just, you're talking about your life. So the Dasein with and the being with and this who-ness, you might think may eventually get you to some kind of authentic encounter with yourself, as if you can shut out everything else and get to this really authentic potentiality to be you. The problem is that, as we go along in this stretch of life, stretching and self-stretching, we're taking everything in as if, don't think of this as you right now, the present, and you're left behind the past, and you're kind of going in the future. All that stuff is coming with you in this structure of motion that's not linear or circular. But you have this feeling, this weird feeling like, wow, I'm losing time, I'm getting older, not just physically, like my elbow hurts, or I just turned 49 this past January, so okay, wow, it'd be COVID-19 again. Wow, they're lucky, they're so young, they get to have fun. No, you can't temporalize this entity. That's all going to get absorbed into this inauthentic way of relating to everything. And you can be the most generous person. You can be a person of enormous responsibility. Dr. Fauci, the doctor that's trying to figure out the pandemic and the plan for saving lives and also renormalizing things a bit. Those people aren't sleeping right now. So, but in this radical model of this existential analytic, this mystery of this Dasein, and this question of being, meaning of being, and the mystery of time is not something linear, or something you're attached to, or something you're in. And quite frankly, it's not in you. When you measure your birthday every year, that's time you might have had epigenetically, or your code is what you have a normal length of life societally. Societally, there are norms about public health expectations of how you're supposed to live in normal times, not during a crisis. So, but that's internal time, and then there's externally measured time. And so, but there is something that you're almost like, it's like, I don't want to call it nausea, like when you have heartburn, you feel like something's reflux, what we call acid reflux, something's coming up. But it's this stretchedness that if you don't take seriously the fact that you could say, I only have one shot at this life, maybe a sequence of moments, but the whole thing taken together, because we're always stuck in that one moment. I'm literally like right now, I'm not tomorrow. But to imagine yourself as that whole totality where you're taking both ends of the birth you had and the death that's coming, and then everything together, and then somehow this is sort of unfolding as an event that can't be spatialized and sequentialized like that. And to think in the most authentic manner of what that vision could look like if you had a moment of the whole. So you don't subsume any existing assumptions with this day about what being with and your Dasein with truly is authentically, as a total understanding of what it means to be in the world. And that's what we're getting in this first paragraph here. So you don't get subsumed in that everyday understanding. The ordinary could be inauthentic. It could be just a replication of how everybody else thinks. In a way, Heidegger is kind of transvaluating. He has a critique of Nietzsche that he'll make later, but Nietzsche questioned everything. So you want to. It's not a superficial gesture. Either like, oh, I want to think differently. I'm an anarchist. I don't want to think like anybody else. I want to come up with a brand new philosophy and a whole new set of values that's never been articulated before, and I'm going to live by it. And then maybe other people will follow it too. Or to Nietzsche's credit, he didn't want anyone to follow his whatever. He was transvaluating all values. He's going to create a whole new way of thinking about being a human being in this age of nihilism, and up and against everything that we've ever thought. So what happened to Nietzsche? Just collapsed under the weight of that enterprise, and yeah. So is Heidegger talking about that heroic attempt to just come up with something? No, he's talking about already being there. Where that's the facticity of the fact that you're not going to do something out of nothing. You're already there. Dasein. So I think we can pause for a second here, because the takeaway is to know that the who is, if I can summarize briefly here, the who is not the entity that's you think you are. It's not something in you. It's not your birth certificate or your legal name. It's not your genealogy. You came from this lineage of people or whatever. It's not your function in society. It's not your physical body. It's not the eeriness. Lacan says in the mirror stage, well, you look in that mirror, this is that first time you're a kid, you don't know anything. It's amorphous, a blob that is attached, obviously, by necessity to another being, your mother, in most cases. This is his time in the 50s, very gender and heteronormative and cisgender, heteronormative and isolated structure. We can deconstruct all that today in a more queer inclusive way and non-heteronormative way, but his stuff in the 50s, attached to your mother, and you just assume that you're a part within a whole. That's how you get all your satisfaction. And she in turn may think that she's also reciprocating in a way, fulfilling your desires, and you're getting an expectation of that. You're not individuated. You don't have self-conception. You haven't seen yourself in the mirror, and body motion hasn't been sort of worked out yet. But everything's being provided for by this. You're this host that you're attached to. And then you break away and you see her, you get that first image in the mirror, like, whoa, who's that? And I thought it was part of this larger entity that I can't spatialize and see, just immanent inside the structure. So, well, wait a minute. Okay, so technically we do this every morning now. I look at myself like, that's not me. And I don't look in the mirror and I'm talking to somebody like, wow, they must think I look this way, or, I think in my own head, maybe I look like this, I'm taller, or this or that. Then I go and I show up and I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, wait a minute, is that me? Who's that? So on the one hand, I need that to build that first sense of self. On the other hand, there's a difference or schism built into that primordial world. They'll never be able to overcome. It's uncanny. Just like when you look in the mirror, you're like, yeah, that's me. That's not George Washington or Michael Jordan. That's Raj. But then, wait a minute, I really don't believe that's me. That's not how I look when people look at me. So the schism in that original sense of self, I know a little diversion into Lacan here, but you can take it back to the who-ness. You don't want to populate the who with yourself. And you don't want to assume that your role in the world is such and such function. You're like, well, you're taking away everything. You're taking away my identity. You're taking away what I do in life, what my purpose is. I'm an artisan. I'm a professor. I'm an athlete. I'm a public servant. I'm a doctor. Well, this is where we're going to lay things out. And one of my hypotheses is that there are traditions out there. I know we kind of preemptively deconstructed the possibility of smuggling theology and religion in the conversation, but there are examples. I admire all the great world religions. There are examples. Moses in the burning bush. No one was around. God that was revealed was not Elohim or Adonai, Lord or God, but Asher, I am who I am. I am the being. It's a Greek translation for Hebrew. I don't want to go down that path, but I will be with you. There's something going on in the relationship there before he gets the law and goes back down and goes to Pharaoh and liberates the folks. But something's going on. There's a relation, and it's about being. Quite frankly, time, I will be. So there's some future. We'll go out there and do this. To, the Buddha's encounter with death as some kind of isolated structure of journey and transcendence, because in a way he embodies and overcomes and depersonalizes the suffering because he's gotten rid of all his desires, but on the other hand, he's encountering death. Very complex tradition. I mentioned Christianity earlier. There's a whole story out there about a person that says I am the Father of one. And that's a real human being, not a phantom, not some superhero, or not something that just doesn't hurt, like me and you. Touch a hot stove, it's going to hurt. And this guy died. He didn't go into a coma. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't just, but without anyone seeing, was truly, totally, absolutely resurrected, something that you and I can't do. So there's a lot going on there with regard to the being with something so massively transcendental, yet still how human and temporal. And in the case of Jesus' death. But we're going to have to put that aside. That's a separate narrative. We're going to have to stay here if we're going to try to interpret Heidegger on his terms, which is not to appropriate him and do something with him, try to get into what he's saying. And yet there's this verisimilitude, there's this eerie set of resemblances. Wittgenstein talks about family resemblances. Well, you can say there's family resemblances between what's buried, the deepest mysteries as possibilities of interpretation buried in this text, and things that are sort of like the elective affinity. I don't want to collapse it into Christianity or, whatever the thematic structures of the narrative of Christianity, but there's going to have to be some kind of dialogue. Let's say a contrast. Lay it out. Here's Dasein and here's Jesus. We're going to do some things with that, with the text. So I'm going to pause there for this segment and come to a conclusion here that we will therefore now go back to the introduction when we start again and read the text from the beginning to the end, Division 1, Division 2 of Hegel. But I thought for a moment I'm going to introduce this question of the who, because the evacuation of our subjectivity, not that we become relativistic or skeptical about the possibility of answering this who am I? Moses, who am I? Why do you want me to go out there and do this? I can't hardly. Don't worry, I'll be with you. I'll tell you I'll know what to do. All right, I'll go. You want me to go tell my people, your people, because you said you hear them suffering. They're going to say, what's my name? Oh, what's your name? What's my name? I am who I am. So don't worry about that. That's who I am. That's my name. The name for all generations. The unnameable name, Hashem. I'm not John. I'm not Bob. I am who I am. So there's mysteries out there that will move human beings towards that level of transcendence and faith and commitment, which is beautiful, as I said. We're not going to do that. I and the Father are one. Are you the Son of the living God, the Sanhedrin? I am. Or all these fantastic predicates. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You can always take your I am and then add a bunch of stuff to it. But we're not going to do that. So we're going to suspend that. And we're going to try and go so deeply into the text where we're going to try to see, in fact, how this Dasein is being in the world and all the several primordial entities that it's with and things that it has to appropriate and all these possibilities it's choosing. It's unfolding this life. It's never present. It's not like writing your autobiography while you're living it. But it's going to be about this, not subjectivity, but as if this really mysterious source is talking. And that source is going to be this thing called primordial, not thing, but this event and relationality and a movement and a disclosure of these temporal ecstasies. Having been this, I am my having been this, it's coming out of the future, that's going to make present and show this phenomenon and logos. It's going to shine out and light up. The source is going to come out, and it's going to turn out that time is the one that's going to be the deepest foundation by which we even can start to talk about the who and then come back to it. But in a way, as I started out earlier, in a way that we human beings can't replicate if you're going to speak from the standpoint of the human being. So someone would say, well, not God, not animal. We talked about that. Not culture, not society, not the social psychology, natural science psychology of human ego perspective. Send Lacan to Freud. Nietzsche, Superman. Nope. So there's no human, but there's a who. The who-ness of time, as he says in 1924. Not what is time. Everybody wants to know what is time. I don't know. It's like it is what it is when it is when it's not. When it's not when it is. Augustine. So you try to stop the river. You can't jump in the same river twice. Heraclitus, and you can't conceptualize when you stop this thing. It's just becoming. Heidegger says all those other folks in the history of philosophy try to deal with time. They're spatializing it. They're part of this ordinary understanding. He's got to destroy that tradition. He's up to something else. And that part, I believe, he was up to something else. Could he finish it? No. I don't know why and how people want to debate that there was a failure or a suspension of failure and or abortment of the original project. There's massively scholarly debates. They've been going on for decades across the world in so many Heidegger circles. We can have conversations about that too, but I'm going to stick to the letter of the text and try to show that this ecstatic structure of temporality is not a three. This time is supposed to be past, present, and future. Well, that whole way of going about it is going to have to be thrown out. And Heidegger didn't articulate this, at least in his Division 3 as it was published in Being and Time. It didn't show up there. Subsequent lectures, of course, people debate what goes on with time later. Very, very complicated. I'm not trying to reduce or dismiss that. I'm just going to speak from within Being and Time to try to articulate time in another way, which will turn out to be four-dimensional. So this is where we're going to pause today, and we will resume a line-by-line reading as we go through the whole work. And I don't know how long it'll take. Someone else can measure words per minute. And then the commentary, of course, to add on to that. So this could take a few years. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I'm just starting. So I hope you will join me on this journey as we go into Being in Time. And I hope it's of some use to folks that really want to find their way not only to this one particular philosopher, but where does he stand with regard to to use his words, the fate of the entire Western tradition about its deepest question. Thank you.